Hello and welcome again to this edition of Phi TV. I'm your host, Brad Swanson. We are coming to you just a few blocks from Florida's capital during the 2022 Florida legislative session. Today, we are joined by Congressman Neal Dunn, not a representative in Tallahassee, but a congressman in Washington, D.C., but from our very own Panama City. Congressman, welcome to Phi TV.
No, thank you very much. It's fun to be here in Tallahassee, and as you say, we're at the wrong legislature for me, but it's the right place. It's a great place to be.
Yeah, well, there's no shortage of great advocates for Florida and America coming from Panama City, but as the congressman, you lead that cabal of freedom-loving leaders from over there. So let's jump right into that. So what made you want to run, or how'd you get to be a congressman?
So this is a great story. I love to tell people. Basically, I was tricked into this job by Alan Betts, and you remember him.
Love the speaker.
He was
yes.
the Speaker of the House from Panama City. As an old family friend, our kids grew up together, and he looked around and said, "We need somebody X to run," and convinced my wife. And the two of them convinced me.
He's a very convincing man.
Honestly, the story was this, it sounds sometimes trite to say this, but it was all that is necessary for evil to triumph is that good men do nothing. Yeah. And, based on that rather simplistic argument, Benson, my wife, Alan, I hope you're out there someplace and you're seeing this. I'm calling you out.
We'll send him the link and make sure he gets it. I tell you what, though, I think what you've brought to Congress and what those of us that get to work both here and up there is your very real world understanding of your specialty, which is obviously medicine, and you're a surgeon, but you're also in doing that, you're also a small business person.
Absolutely.
So you bring that all to DC. Of that type of experience, what issues have you chased, followed, offered up since you've been up in DC? So
healthcare has been a major issue in Washington for years and years. And of course, I am a member of the Doc Caucus, and the Republican conference tends to defer to the Doc Caucus a lot on healthcare issues. And I think we'll become a very, very strong voice somewhere right around January of 2023.
Yeah.
That's my
Who knows what could happen on that day?
Right, but that's the way it's looking.
So in that realm, I won't dive into the COVID narratives, but certainly, you have got to be on speed dial for the leadership in the caucus on those issues. I mean, I can't imagine what it's been like to be both a resource and probably challenging some of the conventional norms as a truth teller.
It absolutely is. And we have really gone off the rails on COVID, and I think we're going to find our way back to the truth here shortly. I see a lot of signs of that in Washington. But we have really been misled as a nation, and as frankly, the whole world, on how to respond to this kind of epidemic, pandemic.
Well, how different has it been, or is it, from when you started to being in Congress under President Trump and now under President Biden? How different is it when you have a different person in the White House?
Enormously different, and for a couple of reasons. Trump, actually, we had a lot of things we got done, and people tend to forget that, but we did a lot of very large things. Just think the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which really turned the economy around on a dime, and now the economy has gone back to trouble.
It's amazing.
And it's inflation. That's totally the White House right now.
So what was it like being up there
when we could accomplish things?
Well, as a congressman, when you were, and you had a president of the White House that wasn't holding press conferences with every signature. He was signing stuff and getting it done. I mean, versus the pace that the current White House acts under, which is demonstrably different. And so,
we have the all-time lowest number of legislative days in the history of Congress, and we are accomplishing so little. And what we do accomplish is of minimal value. And right now, the world is very needful of American leadership. Witness Russia, China.
Well, let's stay on China a little bit there. We look at the supply chain and labor shortages that is affecting everyone, and we see it from everywhere, from the shelves of Publix to goods and services. And America, for the first time in my memory, and to most of my uncles and aunts and parents, is seeing shortages that typically have only been experienced in foreign countries.
You're absolutely right. So one of the things I do is I represent the Energy and Commerce Committee to the China Task Force. So my mission given to me by the leader himself, McCarthy, is to repatriate the supply chains. But we don't have the room to do that in America by ourselves. We have to repatriate the supply chains to the free world.
So describe that. What does that mean to repatriate a supply chain?
We want to bring our manufacturing out of China and back to free world nations, allies,
right,
and of course America itself. We started that with the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. It all of a sudden became tax advantage to actually manufacture something in America if you want to sell it in America.
Right.
But this administration is honestly working at undoing that, and I think we'll change that come January, and we will see. And actually, I also sit on the Parliament of NATO, so meeting there later this week about Russia. But we'll also be talking about, and I'm vice chairman of economics and security. So we want to bring these supply chains back. America, Europe, South America, Canada, are all our great allies.
Yeah. So when we look at the full supply chain, and you look at right down to the constituents in your congressional district, what when you talk about and work on repatriating a supply chain, what would you most want your constituents to know about that exact subject of how it's going to affect them in their
We have great businesses
lives?
that will do that. We don't have to the government doesn't have to micromanage this. They just need to stop disadvantaging companies from manufacturing in America, in Canada, in UK, in Europe, and Mexico, and all these other Latin American countries. If we can make that a good place to manufacture, a profitable place, they'll come.
And does that work the same way as Florida origin and American origin exports to those countries?
Absolutely. And so there's some trade deals that need to be negotiated along the way. And hopefully, we do some of that in NATO, oddly enough. We think of it as a military alliance, but it's also...
Well, that type of policy is really complex. Does anyone ever say, gosh, it's not surgery? And you're like, it's okay, I still have it. Right?
It is. It's like rocket science.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, let's touch a little bit on the pandemic. Let's go there. So when you see Florida's leadership in this, and the country is starting to kind of come in line with how Florida's been leading, right? What's it been like working up in D.C. versus coming home to Florida and then seeing these other states? They say the science hasn't changed, but the political science has.
Yes, it really has. And we actually knew all along. When I was in med school, they taught us that you can't do vaccines by mandate because you undermine your credibility. We knew that 40 years ago.
Wow.
But here we are doing it in spite of what we knew. And it undermines democracy, but it also undermines the credibility of the public health system. I'm afraid we've done damage to the credibility of public health for a generation to come. We need to earn that back from the people. There is no reason for the mandates of vaccine or masks, certainly the way they are being utilized around most of or some of the nation. Florida really is leading the country in this, and everywhere I go around America, I hear that. Every state says to me, you're so lucky to live in Florida.
Yeah. Well, let's stay on that. You don't have to name names, but when your colleagues in Congress, and I assume it's got to be a bipartisan question, when they ask you about how's it going in Florida, what do you tell them?
Listen, even AOC parties in Florida. This is as bipartisan as it gets. They want to be in Florida. Everybody wants to be in Florida, but you certainly see the politics, going, in other directions, locally. And it's about controlling people, not controlling disease.
Right. Well, so you're the envy of all your colleagues in Congress. Maybe the other 26 members in Florida, they get a little bit of love as well. But when we think about taking that policy to the healthcare industry and thinking about, kind of where do we go after COVID? We think of telemedicine and we think of all these things that were on the cutting edge before this literally took all the oxygen out of the room. Where do you see healthcare in its current state, maybe under this administration, maybe in spite of the current administration? Because, you get get everyone kind of locked up, and suddenly the single payer idea starts coming back, and all these things that don't work in a free market system. What do you see as next for healthcare in general for the nation?
So let's start with telemedicine. We argued about this for decades. Now we know it absolutely works. We're going to have to do this, and it comes down to a liability question. We just have to establish that. We can do that very quickly. I think we could do that on a federal level, which would free the telehealth market to become what it really can be, and that's a great start. It also addresses a lot of regional shortages.
Yeah. Well, our members obviously are part of the whole deployment effort and reaching those rural areas. And you think about, the elderly who can't afford to drive all across a rural county to go to one doctor, a hospital, a provider, and move around, and they can get their services in their house. It's almost like a hospital.
I actually have geographically the largest district east of the Mississippi River. So kind of the east half of the United States where people are more compacted together, but we're quite rural.
Right.
And they really appreciate telemedicine.
Yeah.
And we saw that, the improvements of that. And by the way, the VA health system also did, while I was chairman there at VA Health, we got the Mission Act through, and so allowed the veterans to get treated where they live rather than having to travel.
Well, as a son of a veteran, that's amazing. I love that. Okay, so telemedicine's going to be big, and then we look at things like lowering cost of medications for the elderly. It's always a big passion play in Florida, and you look at the vaccine manufacturers.
The Cougars, what was the ones, Panthers, the Gray Panthers. Remember years ago, it was about the cost of medicine.
Yeah,
and it is still is.
And it's still on the tips of everyone's tongues up there in D.C.
Well, I think we could do that, honestly, and I spent a lot of time talking about that. That we have to address some things, some problems in the pricing of pharmaceuticals, and
obviously still protect the innovation and the ability to create new products, but
have to do that. And the Democrats are talking about price controls. Well, that's
not a free market
solution. You give
up
innovation.
Right.
You give up all the great new medicines. Right. Operation Warp Speed, impossible without innovation.
Yeah, amazing. All right, well, we're coming down to our final minute here, and when I think about Dr. Neal Dunn, Congressman Neal Dunn, you were my congressman for a while, and thank you for your service. When I think about you going back to D.C. and even D.C. starting to open up a little bit, where will you and Leader McCarthy be looking to make gains, if you will, in D.C. under the current climate that you're in, and then talk to us about the battlefront of the campaigns just briefly to maybe take back the House and the Senate.
So taking back the House is key, frankly, to getting our agenda through. What we're doing now is largely holding places. I mean, we renamed a bunch of post offices last week when we were in Washington. Right. That's what we did.
That should be top of the ticket, right?
Yeah,
naming post offices.
And a continuing resolution because we couldn't agree on a budget. That's it. That's all we're doing. We need to get back on.
Well,
so we got to win
like
that House back first. But then when we do that, we do have a plan. It's like I mentioned the China Task Force. Our remit is to come up with the legislation, write it, draft it, and have it ready to go in January, not start writing it in January of 23.
Well, you promised to come back on Phi TV when you have that written to tell us more about it?
Back.
All right. Congressman, thank you for coming on. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate you, Joe. Thank you for what you do.
That's all the time we have for this episode of Phi TV. For more great interviews like this one, hit us up on our social media feeds. And for now, thanks for tuning in.